Day and night and day, the living creatures give their praise. To him who lives eternally, they never cease from saying, Holy, holy is Yahweh Almighty, worthy, worthy to receive all glory.
Shalom and welcome everybody. I'm James.
And I'm Leigh.
And we are Between the River and the Ravens. So thankful you are joining us today. We do hope this word is a blessing to you in your life. We're going to be finishing up the second book of Maccabees tonight, chapters 9 through 15. And what an amazing yet difficult story it is to read, but such a blessing. And we're glad that you are here with us.
We do read from the Cepher, but what is up on the screen is
the King James Apocrypha. Chapter 9. About that time came Antiochus with dishonor out of the country of Persia, for he had entered the city called Peripolis, and went about to rob the temple, and to hold the city. Upon the multitude running to defend themselves with their weapons, put them to flight. And so it happened that Antiochus, being put to flight of the inhabitants, returned with shame. Now when he came to Ecbatana, news was brought him what had happened unto Nicanor and Timotheus. Then swelling with anger, he thought to avenge upon the Yahudim the disgrace done unto him by those that made him flee. Therefore commanded he his chariotmen to drive without ceasing, and to dispatch the journey, the judgment of Elohim now following him. For he had spoken proudly in this sort, that he would come to Jerusalem and make it a common burying place of the Yahudim. But Yahuah Sebaoth, the Elohim of Yasharel, smote him with an incurable and invisible plague. For as soon as he had spoken these words, a pain of the bowels that was remediless came upon him, and sore torments of the inner parts. And that most justly, for he had tormented other men's bowels with many and strange torments. Howbeit, he nothing at all ceased from his bragging, but still was filled with pride, breathing out fire in his rage against the Yahudim, and commanding to haste the journey. But it came to pass that he fell down from his chariot, carried violently, so that having a sore fall, all the members of his body were much pained. And thus he that a little afore thought he might command the waves of the sea, so proud was he beyond the condition of man, and weigh the high mountains in a balance, was now cast on the ground, and carried in a horse litter, showing forth unto all the manifest power of Elohim. So that the worms rose up out of the body of this wicked man, and while he lived in sorrow and pain, his flesh fell away, and the filthiness of his smell was noisome to all his army. And the man that thought a little afore he could reach to the stars of heaven, no man could endure to carry for his intolerable stink. Here therefore, being plagued, he began to leave off his great pride, and to come to the knowledge of himself by the scourge of Elohim, his pain increasing every moment. And when he himself could not abide in his own smell, he said those words, It is meet to be subject unto Elohim, and that a man that is mortal should not proudly think of himself if he were Elohim. This wicked person vowed also unto Elohim, who now no more would have mercy upon him, saying thus, that the holy city, to the which he was going in haste to lay it even with the ground, and to make it a common burying place, he would set at liberty. And as touching the Yahudim, whom he had judged not worthy so much as to be buried, but to be cast out with their children, to be devoured of the fowls and wild beasts, he would make them all equals to the citizens of Athens. And the holy temple, which before he had spoiled, he would garnish with goodly gifts, and restore all the holy vessels with many more, and out of his own revenue defray the charges belonging to the sacrifices. Yea, that also he would become a Yahudi himself, and go through all the world that was inhabited, and declare the power of Elohim. But for all this his pains would not cease, for the just judgment of Elohim was come upon him. Therefore, despairing of his health, he wrote unto the Yahudim the Cepher underwritten, containing the form of a supplication after this manner: Antiochus, king and governor, to the good Yahudim, his citizens, wishes much joy, health, and prosperity. If ye and your children fare well, and your affairs be to your contentment, I give very great thanks to Elohim, having my hope in heaven. As for me, I was weak, or else I would have remembered kindly your honor and good will, returning out of Persia, and being taken with a grievous disease. I thought it necessary to care for the common safety of all, not distrusting my health, but having great hope to escape this sickness. But considering that even my father, at what time he led an army into the high countries, appointed a successor, to the end that if anything fell out contrary to expectation, or if any tidings were brought that were grievous, they of the land, knowing to whom the state was left, might not be troubled. Again, considering how that the princes that are borderers and neighbors unto my kingdom wait for opportunities and expect what shall be the event, I have appointed my son Antiochus king, whom I often committed and commended unto many of you when I went up into the high provinces, to whom I have written as follows. Therefore I pray and request you to remember the benefits that I have done unto you generally and in special, and that every man will be still faithful to me and my son. For I am persuaded that he, understanding my mind, will favorably and graciously yield to your desires. Thus the murderer and blasphemer, having suffered most grievously as he entreated other men, so died he a miserable death in a strange country in the mountains. And Philip, that was brought up with him, carried away his body, who also fearing the son of Antiochus, went into Mitzrayim to Ptolemy Pilometer.
Chapter 10. Now Yehuda Maccabee and his company, Yahuah guiding them, recovered the temple and the city. But the altars which the heathen had built in the open street, and also the chapels, they pulled down. And having cleansed the temple, they made another altar. And striking stones, they took fire out of them, and offered a sacrifice after 2 years, and set forth incense and lights and showbread. When that was done, they fell flat down and besought Yahuah that they might come no more into such troubles. But if they sinned any more against him, that he himself would chasten them with mercy, and that they might not be delivered unto the blasphemous and barbarous nations. Now upon the same day that the strangers profaned the temple, on the very same day it was cleansed again, even the 25th day of the same month, which is Kislev. And they kept the 8 days with gladness, as in the feast of Sukkoth, remembering that not long afore they had held the feast of Sukkoth, when as they wandered in the mountains in dens like beasts. Therefore they bore branches and fair bows and palms also, and sang psalms unto him that had given them a good success in cleansing his place. They ordained also by a common statute and decree that every year those days should be kept of the whole nation of the Yahudim. And this was the end of Antiochus, called Epiphanes. Now, will we declare the acts of Antiochus, Eupator, who was the son of this wicked man, gathering briefly the calamities of the wars? So when he was come to the crown, he set one Lysias over the affairs of his realm, and appointed him his chief governor of Silo, Aram, and Phoenicia. For Ptolemy, that was called Macron, choosing rather to do justice unto the Yahudim for the wrong that had been done unto them, endeavored to continue peace with them. Whereupon, being accused of the king's friends before Eupator, and called traitor at every word, because he had left Cyprus, that Philometor had committed unto him, and departed to Antiochus Epiphanes, and seeing that he was in no honorable place, he was so discouraged that he poisoned himself and died. But when Gorgas was governor of the holds, he hired soldiers and nourished war continually with the Yahudim. And therewithal the Edomim, having gotten into their hands the most commodious holds, kept the Yahudim occupied, and receiving those that were banished from Jerusalem, they went about to nourish war. Then they that were with Yehuda Maccabee made supplication and besought Elohim that he would be their helper. And so they ran with violence upon the strongholds of the Edomim. And assaulting them strongly, they won the holds, and kept off all that fought upon the wall, and slew all that fell into their hands, and killed no fewer than 20,000. And because certain who were no less than 9,000 were fled together into 2 very strong castles, having all manner of things convenient to sustain the siege, Yehuda Maccabee left Shimon and Joseph and Zacchae also, and them that were with him, who were enough to besiege them, and departed himself unto those places which more needed his help. Now they that were with Shimon, being led with covetousness, were persuaded for money through certain of those that were in the castle, and took 70,000 drachmas, and let some of them escape. But when it was told to Yehuda Maccabee what was done, he called the governors of the people together, and accused those men that they had sold their brethren for money, and set their enemies free to fight against them. So he slew those that were found traitors, and immediately took the 2 castles. And having good success with his weapons and all things he took in hand, he slew in the 2 holds more than 20,000. Now Timotheus, whom the Yahudim had overcome before, when he had gathered a great multitude of foreign forces and horses out of Asia, not a few, came as though he would take Yehuda by force of arms. But when he drew near, they that were with Yehuda Maccabee turned themselves to pray unto Elohim, and sprinkled earth upon their heads, and girded their loins with sackcloth, and fell down at the foot of the altar, and besought him to be merciful to them, and to be an enemy to their enemies, and an adversary to their adversaries, as the Torah declares. So after the prayer, they took their weapons, and went on further from the city. And when they drew near to their enemies, they kept by themselves. Now the sun being newly risen, they joined both together, the one part having together with their virtue, their refuge also unto yahuah, for a pledge of their success and victory, the other side making their rage leader of their battle. But when the battle waxed strong, there appeared unto the enemies from heaven 5 comely men upon horses, with bridles of gold, and 2 of them led the Yahudim, and took Yehuda Maccabee betwixt them, and covered him on every side with weapons, and kept him safe, but shot arrows and lightnings against the enemies, so that being confounded with blindness and full of trouble, they were killed. And there were slain of footmen 20,500 and 600 horsemen. As for Timotheus himself, he fled into a very stronghold called Gara when Hyrcanus was governor. But they that were with Yehuda Maccabee laid siege against the fortress courageously 4 days. And they that were within, trusting to the strength of the place, blasphemed exceedingly and uttered wicked words. Nevertheless, upon the 5th day, early, 20 young men of Yehuda Maccabee's company, inflamed with anger because of the blasphemies, assaulted the wall manly, and with a fierce courage killed all that they met withal. Others likewise ascended after them, while they were busied with them that were within, burnt the towers, and kindling fires burnt the blasphemers alive, and others broke open the gates, and having received in the rest of the army, took the city, and killed Timotheus, that was hid in a certain pit, and Hyrcanus his brother, with Apollophanes. When this was done, they praised Yahweh with psalms and thanksgiving, who had done so great things for Yasharel and given them the victory.
Chapter 11. Not long after the victory over Timotheus, Lysias, the king's protector and cousin, who also managed the affairs, took sore displeasure of the things that were done. And when he had gathered about 80,000 with all the horsemen, he came against the Yahudim, thinking to make the city a habitation of the other nations, and to make a gain of the temple, as of the other chapels of the heathen, and to set the high priesthood for sale every year, not at all considering the power of Elohim, but puffed up with his 10,000s of footmen, and his thousands of horsemen, and his 80 elephants. So he came to Yehuda and drew near to Beet-Sura, which was a strong town, but distant from Jerusalem, about 5 stadion, and he laid sore siege unto it. Now when they that were with Yehuda Maccabee heard that he besieged the holds, they and all the people with lamentation and tears besought yahuah that he would send a good angel to deliver Yasharel. Then Yehuda Maccabee himself first of all took weapons, exhorting the others that they would jeopardize themselves together with him to help their brethren. So they went forth together with a willing mind. And as they were at Jerusalem, there appeared before them on horseback one in white clothing, shaking his armor of gold. Then they praised the merciful Elohim altogether, and took heart, so much so that they were ready not only to fight with men, but with most cruel beasts, and to pierce through walls of iron. Thus they marched forward in their armor, having a helper from heaven, for Yahuah was merciful unto them. And giving a charge upon their enemies like lions, they slew 11,000 footmen and 1,600 horsemen, and put all the other to flight. Many of them also being wounded escaped naked, and Lysias himself fled away shamefully, and so escaped. Who, as he was a man of understanding, casting with himself what loss he had had, and considering that the Ephraim could not be overcome, because El Shaddai helped them, he sent unto them, and persuaded them to agree to all reasonable conditions, and promised that he would persuade the king that he needs to be a friend unto them. Then Yehuda Maccabee consented to all that Lysias desired, being careful of a common good, and whatsoever Yehuda Maccabee wrote unto Lysias concerning the Yahudim, the king granted it. For there were Sepharim written unto the Yahudim from Lysias to this effect: Lysias unto the people of the Yahudim sends greetings. Yochanan and Avshalom, who were sent from you, delivered me the petition subscribed, and made request for the performance of the contents thereof. Therefore, what things soever that were to be reported to the king, I have declared them, and he has granted as much as might be. And if then ye will keep yourselves loyal to the state, hereafter also will I endeavor to be a means of your good. But of the particulars I have given orders both to these and the others that came from me, to commune with you. Fare ye well the 148th year, and 24th day of the month Dioscorthius. Now the king Cepher contained these words, King Antiochus unto his brother Lysias sends greetings. Since our father is translated unto the Elohim, our will is that they that are in our realm live quietly, that everyone may attend upon his own affairs. We understand also that the Yahudim would not consent to our father for to be brought unto the custom of other nations, but had rather keep their own manner of living, for the which cause they require of us that we should suffer them to live after their own Torah. Wherefore our mind is that this nation shall be in rest, and we have determined to restore them their temple, that they may live according to the customs of their forefathers. And you shall do well, therefore, to send unto them and grant them peace, that when they are certified of our mind, they may be of good comfort and ever go cheerfully about their own affairs. And the Cepher of the king unto the nation of the Yahudim was after this manner. King Antiochus sends greeting to the council and the rest of the Yahudim. If ye fare well, we have our desire, we are also in good health. Menelaus declared unto us that your desire was to return home and to follow your own business. Wherefore they that will depart shall have safe conduct till the 13th day of Xanthicus with security. And the Yahudim shall use their own kind of meats and Torah as before, and none of their manner of ways shall be molested for these ignorantly done. I have sent also Menelaus that he may comfort you. Fare ye well in the 148th day, and the 15th day of the month Xanthicus. The Romaim also sent unto them a Cepher containing these words, Quintus Memmius and Titus Manius, ambassadors of the Romaim, send greeting unto the people of the Yahudim. Whatsoever Lysias the king's cousin has granted, therewith we also are we well pleased. But touching such things as he judged to be referred to the king, after ye have advised thereof, send one forthwith, that we may declare as it is convenient for you, for we are now going to Antioch. Therefore send some with speed, that we may know what is your mind. Farewell, this 148th year, the 15th day of the month Xanthicus.
Chapter 12. When these covenants were made, Lysias went unto the king, and the Yahudim were about their husbandry. But of the governors of several places, Timotheus and Apollonius, the son of Genius, also Hieronymus and Demophon, and beside them Nicanor, the governor of Cyprus, would not suffer them to be quiet and live in peace. The men of yhvh also did such a wicked deed. They prayed the Yahudim that dwelt among them to go with their women and children into boats which they had prepared, as though they had meant them no hurt, who accepted of it according to the common decree of the city, as being desirous to live in peace and suspecting nothing. But then they were gone forth into the deep. They drowned no less than 200 of them. When Yehuda heard of this cruelty done unto his countrymen, he commanded those that were with him to make them ready. and calling upon Elohim, the righteous judge, he came against those murderers of his brethren and burnt the haven by night and set the boats on fire, and those that fled thither he slew. And when the town was shut up, he went backward as if he would return to root out all of them of the city of yhvh. But when he heard that the Yamnim were minded to do in the like manner unto the Yahudim that dwelt among them, he came upon the Yamnim also by night and set fire on the haven and the navy, so that the light of the fire was seen at Jerusalem 240 stadion off. Now when they were gone from thence 9 stadion in their journey toward Timotheus, no fewer than 5,000 men on foot and 500 horsemen of the Aravim set upon him. Whereupon there was a very sore battle, but Yehuda's side by the help of Elohim got the victory, so that the nomads of Arav, being overcome, besought Yehuda for peace, promising both to give him cattle and to pleasure him otherwise. Then Yehuda, thinking indeed that they would be profitable in many things, granted them peace, whereupon they shook hands, and so they departed to their tents. Yehuda went also about to make a bridge to a certain strong city, which was fenced about with walls and inhabited by people of diverse countries, and the name of it was Caspis. But they that were within it put such trust in the strength of the walls and provision of victuals that they behaved themselves rudely toward them that were with Yehuda, railing and blaspheming and uttering such words as were not to be spoken. Wherefore Yehuda with his company, calling upon the great yahuah of the world, who without rams or engines of war did cast down Jericho in the time of yahusha, gave a fierce assault against the walls and took the city by the will of Elohim and made unspeakable slaughters, so much so that a lake 2 stadion broad near adjoining thereunto, being filled full, was seen running with blood. Then departed they from thence 750 stadion and came to Haraka unto the Yahudim that are called men of Tobiyahu. But as for Timotheus, they found him not in the places, for before he had dispatched anything, he departed from thence, having left a very strong garrison in a certain hold. Howbeit Dositheus and Sosipater, who were of Yehuda Maccabees captains, went forth and slew those that Timotheus had left in the fortress, above 10,000 men. And Yehuda Maccabee ranged his army by hands and set them over the bands, and went against Timotheus, who had about him 120,000 men of foot and 2,500 horsemen. Now when Timotheus had knowledge of Yehuda's coming, he sent the women and children and the other baggage unto a fortress called Carnion, for the town was hard to besiege and uneasy to come unto, but reason of the straitness of all places. But when Yehuda, his first band, came in sight, the enemies, being smitten with fear and terror through the appearing of him who sees all things, fled amain, one running into this way, another that way, so as they that were often hurt of their own men and wounded with the points of their own swords. Yehuda also was very earnest in the pursuing of them, killing those wicked wretches, of whom he slew about 30,000 men. Moreover, Timotheus himself fell into the hands of Dositheus and Sosipater, whom he besought with much craft to let him go with his life, because he had many of the Yahudim's parents and the brethren of some of them, who if they put him to death should not be regarded. So when he had assured them with many words that he would restore them without hurt, according to the agreement, they let him go for saving of their brethren. Then Yehuda Maccabee marched forth to Carnion and to the temple of Artargadas, and there he slew 25,000 persons. And after he had put to flight and destroyed them, Yehuda removed the host toward Ephron, a strong city, wherein Lysias abode, and a great multitude of diverse nations. And the strong young men kept the walls and defended them mightily, wherein also was great provision of engines and spears. But when Yehuda and his company had called upon El Elyon, who with his power breaks the strength of his enemies, they won the city and slew 25,000 of them that were within. From thence they departed to Scythopolis, which lies 600 stadion from Jerusalem. But when the Yahudim that dwelt there had testified that the Scythopolitans dealt lovingly with them and entreated them kindly in the time of their adversity, they gave them thanks, desiring them to be friendly still unto them. And so they came to Jerusalem, the feast of the weeks approaching. And after the feast, called the Shavuot, they went forth against Gorgias, the governor of Edom, who came out with 3,000 men of foot and 400 horsemen. And it happened that in their fighting together, a few of the Yahudim were slain, at which time Dositheus, one of Basanor's company, who was on horseback and a strong man, was still upon Gorgias, and taking hold of his coat, drew him by force. And when he would have taken that cursed man alive, a horseman of Thracia, coming upon him, smote off his shoulder, so that Gorgias fled unto Marissa. Now when they that were with Gorgias had fought long and were weary, Yehuda called upon Yahweh that he would show himself to be their helper and leader of the battle. And with that he began in his own language, and sung psalms with a loud voice, and rushing unawares upon Gorgias's men, he put them to flight. So Yehuda gathered his host and came into the city of Adullam. And when the 7th day came, they purified themselves, as the custom was, and kept the Shabbat in the same place. And upon the day following, as the use had been, Yehuda and his company came to take up the bodies of them that were slain, and to bury them with their kinsmen in their fathers' graves. Now under the coats of everyone that was slain, they found things consecrated to the idols of the Yamnim, which is forbidden the Yahudim by the Torah. Then every man saw that this was the cause, wherefore they were slain. All men therefore praising Yahweh, the righteous judge, who had opened the things that were hid, betook themselves unto prayer, and besought him that the sin committed might wholly be put out of remembrance. Besides, that noble Yehuda exhorted the people to guard themselves from sin, for so much as they saw before their eyes the things that came to pass for the sins of those that were slain. And when he had made a gathering throughout the company to the sum of 2,000 drachmas of silver, he sent it to Jerusalem to offer a sin offering, doing therein very well and honestly, in that he was mindful of the resurrection. For if he had not hoped that they that were slain should have risen again, it had been superfluous and vain to pray for the dead. And also in that he perceived that there was great favor laid up for those that died in righteousness. It was a holy and good thought, whereupon he made a reconciliation for the dead, that they might be delivered from sin.
Chapter 13. In the 149th year it was told Yehuda that Antiochus Epiter was coming with a great power into Yehuda, and with him Lysias his protector and ruler of his affairs, having either of them a Yavani power of footmen 110,000, and horsemen 5,300, and elephants 22, and 300 chariots armed with hooks. Menelaus also joined himself with them, and with great dissimulation encouraged Antiochus, not for the safeguard of the country, but because he thought to have been made governor. But the King of Kings moved Antiochus' mind against this wicked wretch, and Lysias informed the king that this man was the cause of all mischief, so that the king commanded to bring him unto Berea, and to put him to death, as the manner is in that place. Now there was in that place a tower of 50 cubits high, full of ashes, and it had a round instrument which on every side hang down into the ashes. And whosoever was condemned of sacrilege or had committed any other grievous crime, there did all men thrust him unto death. Such a death it happened that wicked men to die, not having so much as burial in the earth, and that most justly. For inasmuch as he had committed many sins about the altar, whose fire and ashes were holy, he received his death in ashes. Now the king came with a barbarous and haughty mind to do far worse to the Yahudim than had been done in his father's time. Which things when Yehuda perceived, he commanded the multitude to call upon yahuah night and day, and that if ever at any other time he would now also help them, being at the point to be put from their torah, from their country, and from the holy temple, and that he would not suffer the people that had even now been but a little refreshed, to be in subjection to the blasphemous nations. So when they had all done this together, and besought the merciful yahuah with weeping and fasting, and laying flat upon the ground 3 days long, Yehuda, having exhorted them, commanded they should be in a readiness. And Yehuda, being apart with the elders, determined before the king's host should enter into Yehuda and get the city, to go forth and try the matter in fight by the help of yahuah. So when he had committed all to the Creator of the world, and exhorted his soldiers to fight manfully, even unto death, for the Torah, the temple, the city, the country, and the commonwealth, he camped by Modin. And having given the watchword to them that were about him, victory is of Elohim. With the most valiant and choice young men he went into the king's tent by night, and slew in the camp about 4,000 men, and the chiefest of the elephants, with all that were upon him. And at last they filled the camp with fear and tumult, and departed with good success. This was done in the break of the day, because the protection of yahuah did help him. Now when the king had taken a taste of the manliness of the Yahudim, he went about to take the holds by policy, and marched toward Beit Surah, which was a stronghold of the Yahudim. But he was put to flight, failed, and loss of his men. For Yehuda had conveyed unto them that were in it such things as were necessary. But Rodaos, who was in the Yahudim's host, disclosed the secrets to the enemies. Therefore he was sought out, and when they had gotten him, they put him in prison. The king treated with them in Beit Surah the second time, gave his hand, took theirs, departed, fought with Yehuda, was overcome, heard that Philip, who was left over the affairs of Antioch, was desperately bent, confounded, entreated the Yahudim, submitted himself and swore to all equal conditions, agreed with them and offered sacrifice, honored the temple and dealt kindly with the place, and accepted well of Yehuda Maccabee, made him principal governor from Akko unto Gerar, came to Akko. The people there were grieved from the covenants that they stormed, because they would make their covenants void. Lysias went up to the judgment seat, said as much as could be in defense of the cause, persuaded, pacified, made them well affected, returned to Antioch. Thus it went touching the king's coming and departing.
Chapter 14. After 3 years was Yehuda informed that Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, having entered by the haven of Tripolis with a great power and navy, had taken the country and killed Antiochus and Lysias his protector. Now one Alchemist, who had been high priest and had defiled himself willfully in the times of their mingling with the other nations, seeing that by no means he could save himself, nor have any more access to the holy altar, came to King Demetrius in the 151st year, presenting unto him a crown of gold and a palm, and also of the bows which were used solemnly in the temple. And so that day he held his peace. Howbeit, having gotten opportunity to further his foolish enterprise, and being called into council by Demetrius, and asked how the Yahudim stood affected, and what they intended, he answered thereunto. Those of the Yahudim that he called Hasidians, whose captain is Yehuda Maccabee, nourish war and are seditious, and will not let the rest be in peace. Therefore I, being deprived of my ancestors' honor, I mean the high priesthood, am now come hither. First, truly, for the unfeigned care I have of things pertaining to the king, and secondly, even for that I intend the good of my own countrymen, for all our nation is in no small misery through the unadvised dealing of them aforesaid. Wherefore, O king, seeing you know all these things, be careful for the country and our nation, which is pressed on every side, according to the clemency that you readily show unto all. For as long as Yehuda lives, it is not possible that the state should be quiet. This was no sooner spoken of him by others of the king's friends, being maliciously set against Yehuda, did more incense Demetrius. And forthwith calling Nicanor, who had been master of the elephants, and making him governor over Yehuda, he sent him forth, commanding him to slay Yehuda, and to scatter them that were with him, and to make Alcimus high priest of the great temple. Then the heathen that had fled out of Yehuda from Yehuda came to Nicanor by flocks, thinking the harm and calamities of the Yahudim to be their welfare. Now when the Yahudim heard of Nicanor's coming, and that the heathen were up against them, they cast earth upon their heads, and made supplication to him that had established his people forever, and who always helps his portion with manifestation of his presence. So at the commandment of the captain they removed straightway from thence, and came near unto them at the town of Dissah. Now Shimon, Yehuda's brother, had joined battle with Nicanor, but was somewhat discomfited through the sudden silence of his enemies. Nevertheless, Nicanor, hearing of the manliness of them that were with the Yehuda, and the courageousness that they had to fight for their country, dared not to try the matter by the sword. Wherefore he sent Posidonius and Theodotus and Mattatyahu to make peace. So when they had taken long advisement thereupon, and the captain had made the multitude acquainted therewith, and it appeared they were all of one mind, they consented to the covenants, and appointed a day to meet in together by themselves. And when the day came, and stools were set for either of them, Ludus placed armed men ready in convenient places, lest some treachery should be suddenly practiced by the enemies. So they made a peaceable conference. Now Nicanor abode in Jerusalem, and did not hurt, but sent away the people that came flocking unto him. And he would not willingly have Yehuda out of his sight, for he loved the man from his heart. He prayed him also to take a woman and to beget children. So he married, was quiet, and took part of this life. But Alcimus, perceiving the love that was betwixt them, and considering the covenants that were made, came to Demetrius and told him that Nicanor was not well affected toward the state, for that he had ordained Yehuda, a traitor to his realm, to be the king's successor. Then the king, being in a rage and provoked with the accusations of the most wicked man, wrote Nicanor, signifying that he was much displeased with the covenants, and commanded him that he should send Yehuda Maccabee prisoner in all haste unto Antioch. When this came to Nicanor's hearing, he was much confounded in himself, and took it grievously that he should make void the articles which were agreed upon, the man being in no fault. But because there was no dealing against the king, he watched his time to accomplish this thing by policy. Notwithstanding, when Yehuda Maccabee saw that Nicanor began to churlish unto him, and that he entreated him more roughly than he was wont, perceiving that such sour behavior came not of good, he gathered together not a few of his men, and withdrew himself from Nicanor. But the other, knowing that he was notably prevented by Yehuda's policy, came into the great and holy temple, and commanded the priests that were offering their usual sacrifices to deliver him the man. And when they swore they could not tell where the man was whom he sought, he stretched out his right hand toward the temple, and made an oath in this manner: If ye will not deliver me Yehuda as a prisoner, I will lay this temple of Elohim even with the ground, and I will break down the altar and erect a notable temple unto Bacchus. After these words, he departed. Then the priests lifted up their hands toward heaven, and besought him that was ever a defender of their nation, saying in this manner: You, O Yahweh of all things, who have need of nothing, were pleased that the temple of your habitation should be among us. Therefore now, O holy Adonai of all holiness, keep this house ever undefiled, which lately was cleansed, and stop every unrighteous mouth. Now was there accused unto Nicanor one Razis, one of the elders of Jerusalem, a lover of his countrymen, and a man of a very good rapport, who for his kindness was called a father of the Yahudim. For in the former times, when they were mingled not themselves with the other nations, he had been accursed of Yahudaism, and did boldly jeopardize his body and life with all vehemency for the faith of the Yahudim. So Nicanor, willing to declare the hate that he bore unto Yahudim, sent above 500 men of war to take him, for he thought by taking him to do the Yahudim much hurt. Now when the multitude would have taken the tower, and violently broken into the outer door, and bade that fire should be brought to burn it, he, being ready to be taken on every side, fell upon his sword, choosing rather to die manfully than to come into the hands of the wicked, to be abused otherwise than beseemed his noble birth. But missing his stroke through haste, the multitude also rushing within the doors, he ran boldly up to the wall, and cast himself down manfully among the thickest of them. But they quickly give him back, and a space being made, he fell down into the midst of the void place. Nevertheless, while there was yet breath within him, being inflamed with anger, he rose up, and through his blood gushed out like spouts of water, and his wounds were grievous. Yet he ran through the midst of the throng, and standing upon a steep rock, when as his blood was now quite gone, he plucked out his bowels, and taking them in both hands, he cast them upon the throng, and calling upon Yahuah of life and ruach to restore him those again, and he thus died.
Chapter 15. But Nicanor, hearing that Yehuda and his company were in the strong places about Shemaron, resolved without any danger to set upon them on the Shabbat. Nevertheless, the Yahudim that were compelled to go with him said, O destroy not so cruelly and barbarously, but give honor to that day, which he that sees all things has honor with holiness above all other days. Then the most ungracious wretch demanded if there were a mighty one in heaven, that he commanded the Sabbath to be kept. And when they said, There is in heaven a living yahuah and mighty, who commanded the seventh day to be kept. Then said the other, And I also am mighty upon earth, and I command to take arms and to do the king's business. Yet he obtained not to have his wicked will done. So Nicanor, in exceedingly pride and haughtiness, determined to set up a public monument of his victory over Yehuda and them that were with him. But Yehuda Maccabee had ever sure confidence that yahuah would help him. Wherefore he exhorted his people not to fear the coming of the heathen against them, but to remember the help which in former times they had received from heaven, and now to expect the victory and aid which should come unto them from El Shaddai. And so comforting them out of the Torah and the prophets, and withal putting them in mind of the battles that they won afore, he made them more cheerful. And when he had stirred up their minds, he gave them their charge, showing them therewithal the falsehood of the heathen and the breach of oaths. Thus he armed every one of them, not so much with defensive shields and spears, as with comfortable and good words. And besides that, he told them a dream worthy to be believed, as if it had been so indeed, which did not a little rejoice them. And this was his vision, that Onyahu, who had been high priest, a virtuous and good man, refined in conversation, gentle in condition, well-spoken also, and exercised from a child in all points of virtue, holding up his hands, prayed for the whole body of the Yahudim. This done, in like manner there appeared a man with gray hairs, and exceedingly glorious, who was of a wonderful and excellent majesty. Then Onyahu answered, saying, This is a lover of the brethren, who prays much for the people, and for the holy city, to wit, Yirmiyahu, the prophet of Elohim. Whereupon Yirmiyahu, holding forth his right hand, gave to Yehuda a sword of gold, and in giving it spoke thus, Take this holy sword, a gift from Elohim, with the which you shall wound the adversaries. Thus being well comforted by the words of Yehuda, which were very good, and able to stir them up to valor, and to encourage the hearts of the young men, they determined not to pitch camp, but courageously to set upon them, and manfully to try the matter by conflict, because the city and the sanctuary and the temple were in danger. For the care that they took for their women and their children, their brethren and folks, was in least account with them. But the greatest and principal fear was for the holy temple. Also they that were in the city took not the least care, being troubled for the conflict abroad. And now, when as all looked what should be the trial, and the enemies were already come near, and the army was set in array, and the beasts conveniently placed, and the horsemen set in wings, Yehuda Maccabee, seeing the coming of the multitude, and the diverse preparations of armor and fierceness of the beasts, stretched out his hands toward heaven, and called upon yahuah that works wonders, knowing that victory comes not by arms, but even as it seems good to him, he gives it to such as are worthy. Therefore in his prayer he said after this manner, O yahuah, you did send your angel in the time of Yehezkiyahu, king of Yehuda, and did slay in the host of Sancheriv 185,000. Wherefore also, now also, O yahuah of heaven, send a good angel before us, for a fear and dread unto them. And through the might of your arm, let those be stricken with terror that come against your holy people to blaspheme. And he ended thus. Then Nicanor and they that were with them came forward with shofars and songs. But Yehuda and his company encountered the enemies with invocation and prayer, so that fighting with their hands and praying unto Elohim with their hearts, they slew no less than 35,000 men. For though the appearance of Elohim, they were greatly cheered. Now when the battle was done, returning again with joy, they knew that Nicanor lay dead in his harness. Then they made a great shout and noise, praising El Shaddai in their own language. And Yehuda, who was ever the chief defender of the citizens, both in body and mind, and who continued his love toward his countrymen all his life, commanded to strike off Nicanor's head and his hand with his shoulder, and bring them to Jerusalem. So when he was there and called them of his nation together, and set the priests before the altar, he sent for them that were of the tower, and showed them vile Nicanor's head, and the hand of that blasphemer, which was with proud brags he had stretched out against the holy temple of El Shaddai. And when he had cut out the tongue of that wicked Nicanor, he commanded that they should give it by pieces unto the fowls, and hang up the rearward of his madness before the temple. So every man praised toward the heaven the glorious yahuah, saying, Blessed be he that has kept his own place undefiled. He hanged also Nicanor's head upon the tower, an evident and manifest sign unto all of the help of yahuah. And they ordained all with a common decree in no case to let that day pass without solemnity, but to celebrate the 13th day of the 12th month, which in the Amorith tongue is called Adar, the day before Mordecai's day. Thus went it with Nicanor, and from that time forth the Ephraim had the city in their power, and here will I make an end. And if I have done well, and as is fitting the story, it is that which I desired. But if slenderly and meaningly, it is that which I could obtain to. For as it is hurtful to drink wine or water alone, and as wine mingled with water is pleasant, the delights, the taste, even so speech finely framed delights the ears of them that read the story. And here shall be an end. All right, that concludes the second book of Maccabees. We are done with the half of it. We've got books 3 and 4 ahead. We hope that you continue to join in and that this message is a blessing for you. Shalom and good night.
Shalom.
Day and night and night and day, the living creatures give their praise to him who lives eternally. They never Yahweh.